It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and text for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the hyperspace. Podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name's Matt.
I'm Jared.
I'm Mike.
Hey guys, how was your life day?
Happy Life Day. Well, it was a day of peace. It was a day of harmony.
We had a nice Christmas, except the day after my oldest, David, who was our special guest last episode,
Yes.
got the flu.
Oh no, really? That stinks.
But somehow it missed me and Seth, so I don't know. We got lucky.
Good. I'm glad you're not sick because you don't need to be bringing that junk back into the 25th century.
Like a super
I
bug.
hope he didn't contaminate anyone while he was here.
You'd kill us all. Man. All right. But, speaking of killing us all and dying and horrible deaths, tonight, we're finally going to do it. We're finally going to give you...
The one chip challenge?
Someone told me they don't sell those anymore.
They don't. They stopped because like
What?
3 people died.
No.
Yes. So, Matt, we've dodged a bullet, I think.
I'm a survivor.
Speaking of nothing in particular, when I was visiting Tennessee around the Life Day time, I showed that video of Mike to my parents and my in-laws. And
Are you serious?
yes, I edited it some. I mean, I fast forwarded parts of it to when you were really uncomfortable and you're just sitting at the table going. They got quite a kick out of it. And then my mom was like, "What's the one chip challenge? What's all this about?" And then
the thing was I didn't even get the worst part on tape.
Yeah, that's the aftermath.
When it hit my stomach.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
worse.
I thought I was going to die.
Well, another time I thought I was going to die was when we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. The hyperspace is finally breaking it down. We're finally doing our Star Wars Holiday Special episode.
the Star Wars Holiday Special.
And, there's really no better time to be talking about this because just a month or so ago, an excellent documentary was released called A Disturbance in the Force, the story of the Star Wars Holiday Special, along with a companion book. And it was I think it was quite an info dump on this special. I always knew one day something like this would get made, whether in book form or documentary form, and we got both. Mm-hmm. But I got to say, I was surprised about how much I learned from the documentary and specifically the book.
Yeah, I think this is the final word on this dark corner in the Star Wars history. But I just don't see what else you could do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After watching the documentary, which we'll get into some detail on, I was thinking this really felt to me that although it was interesting because, we've all grown up with the lore of the holiday special and we participated in the bootleg extravaganza and the prize of getting one. And but I felt like with the internet the way it is with like YouTube and stuff, it's like the mystery of the holiday special has kind of thinned out a little bit. And it's not quite the underground cult, find that it used to be. So I as I'm watching the documentary, which was a lot of it was really fascinating, and I learned a lot, which I didn't. I'm glad that I could still learn stuff about Star Wars. But I just felt it was like a little late. late coming. Like if this documentary had been made 10 years ago, it might have felt a little more at home. But
I would say read the book
yeah, I'm going to. But
because the book. I read the book before I watched the documentary, and I'm really glad
yeah.
because the book is a really deep dive. But before we get all into that, I think the thing we need to make clear for the younger viewers is this, and they cover this in the documentary well, actually, is this thing was almost mythical. Like it was
Yes.
one of those things, like you said, it was before the internet.
Well, hold on, Mike,
And
wait, hold that thought. Wait, what, Jared, do me a favor. Just explain to the listeners, if they don't know what we're talking about, what was the holiday special?
It was a variety show special that was aired in November of 1978, and it focused on Chewbacca's family, but it was really sort of it was a product of its time.
Mhm.
And um, Mike, you might be able to speak to this better. Did you ever watch any of the variety shows of that time period?
Oh yeah, I mean that was all, I mean it was all that was on.
Mhm.
There was always a variety show, and I think the book covers that really well. Like I think the 70s gave us two things that we can never should ever come back. And that's disco and the variety
The
show.
variety show. Yes.
And which the Star Wars was so ill-fitting for this.
Yes.
But I just want to say, I mean, what I wanted to go back to like the rarity of it. Did you guys? I actually saw it when it was on. That's why I knew it existed. I don't remember how much. I don't think I saw the whole thing. I don't even think I knew it was on. I think we turned it on. And it was like halfway on because the book. It was funny. I was reading the book. The book said it aired the same time there was a mini series on called Pearl, which
About
was
Pearl
about
Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, and I remember us watching that. So I don't know if Pearl ended early or what, but I did see it. I because the scenes I specifically remember seeing as a kid was the Lumpy being in the bedroom and his stuff getting tore apart by the stormtroopers, and then them tricking the stormtrooper to go over the balcony. Those are the moments that really I carried with me.
Mhm.
And but to the point of like I guess there was people who even doubted this thing existed because the first time it aired was the last time.
Mhm. It only aired once.
My
And
parents, we made a point to watch it. I was three,
oh,
just
so
I
you
was like,
guys did watch
I
it?
was 3 years old, and but you know what, I didn't remember it until I started hearing about it much later, and then I started like it started coming back to me. It's a lot like The Hobbit, those Lord of the Rings animated movies. I saw those when I was real young, and I'd forgotten all about them until I started seeing little scenes, and then it started coming back to me and say, "Oh, I remember watching
Mhm.
that."
Yeah.
Jared, did
I
you have any
I s-
exposure to it?
no, no, not in the initial airing. I had no idea about it until the mid to mid 80s when I picked up an old Starlog magazine.
Hmm.
That that was the cover story was the Star Wars Holiday Special. And this is probably about like I was
Is that the
probably
one that has the cantina with B. Arthur on it?
yes, it's a cover. I think I still have that around here somewhere, but I got it at McKay's Books.
Oh
It's a
wow.
used bookstore. I was probably about 12 years old, and I was like, and it was a big, I mean, up until this book and documentary that came out, it was probably the largest piece of information you could find on the holiday special. And it was cool because it was written at the time
Yeah, I
it
was
was
promoting
being
it.
made.
That's pretty
So
cool.
I saw these pictures of Chewbacca's family. I saw pictures of Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, and I was convinced that I was missing a Star Wars film. From the pictures in Starlog, the pictures did not reveal that it was like shot on video.
Mhm.
The pictures they took, the publicity photos were shot on film. So it looked like you were seeing a film still. And I was like, man, what is this thing? there was no internet then. So I had the only proof I had that this existed was this Starlog magazine for several years.
Well,
And I was fascinated.
I'll tell you the thing the book and the documentary both left out, and I don't know if it was done by design because they kept talking about how Lucas was burying this. They didn't want to talk about it. Uh, in the probably late 90s, Star Wars Insider actually did an issue covering the holiday special. And they did a pretty good job of it. I mean, it was a pretty balanced. It wasn't like, oh, we hate this. I mean, they just talked about how loopy it was and, what was specifically in it. So, and for a long time, that was my source of information on it. But it was around this time too when the VHSs started to hit the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I finally got to watch it. And I'll never forget. And I hope do you mind if I go into this? I'm not jumping ahead of anything, am I?
No,
There's no rules here, Mike.
So, well, I remember
this is a variety show. Just have at it.
We used to, when I first started working at Shop at Home, the cool thing about when I first started Shop at Home is like we all discovered we were Star Wars fans. And it was the first time we were all like, there was a bunch of us in the room that loved Star Wars. So we used to talk about Star Wars all the time. And my friend Kevin, who actually ended up being an editor on Rogue One, he had like a Laserdisc player. He was the first person I knew that had a Laserdisc player. He had the Star Wars, that trilogy box set. So he actually got his hands on the holiday special. And we were like, oh my gosh, like, please, you have to let us borrow this. We want to watch this. I mean, we were just dying to watch it. And he said, okay, I'll let you watch it. He goes, I'm telling you, man, it's bad. And we're like, no, it can't be that bad. He's like, I'm serious. It's really, really bad. So he brought it to us. And I remember we went to my friend Paul's house, who was also on the show.
Yeah, he's the Stranger Things
yeah, he
guy.
was the wardrobe.
Yeah.
So we went to his house. It was me, him, Chris Imge, Brian, my friend Brian, who I think still listens, and I think my friend Garrick. And we were all stoked, man. We were in his living room. We put it in. And no, I'm not kidding, man. We were about 15 or 20 minutes in. And we were like, hey, let's go outside and toss Frisbee for a little bit. I mean, we had to stop. I mean, it was just so brutal.
Yeah.
And that was my first time re-watching it after having seen it as like a 6-year-old when it first broadcast on TV.
It's a mess. It's such a train wreck of a program.
And what Mike describes is how I think all of us came to it in some way, because there's no YouTube then in the early 90s. And I got the special by, I was on the Prodigy message boards or AOL, one of those, and I had a copy of the episode of Young Indiana Jones that Harrison Ford appeared on. And this guy said, "I'll trade you a copy of the holiday special if you send me the Indiana Jones
That's
thing."
awesome.
So, I made
I trust you. You're on the internet.
Well, no, and that's the thing. It was like, okay, and that's just what we did. It's like, okay, I mailed it today.
Huge. It's like MST3K, keep circulating the tapes. That's what they did.
Well, and that's what I did. I mailed him the Indiana Jones thing, and a few days later in the mail, I got the holiday special, and I was like, oh man. And
I traded up.
My sister was there, and I was like, hey, this is like this weird Star Wars movie that no one's ever seen it was like supposed to be like a Christmas show or something. She's like, okay, we'll put it in. So it starts, and I think like 10 minutes in, my sister's like, what the hell is this?
We should talk about the first 10 minutes too.
And I'm like, and I had never seen it before because, so she was seeing it for the first time, same as me. And I was just like, my jaw was agape. And I was like, this is horrible. I can't I can't believe this. And so she tapped out like pretty early. But I just sat down there in my basement and was just like waiting for something great to happen. And, aside from the coolness of the Boba Fett cartoon, like nothing great happened. I mean, I was waiting for like, oh man, Harrison Ford can save this thing, right? Come on. No, he couldn't. So, and this was probably 1995, I'd
Yeah,
say.
you were in college. God.
What
Yeah, I
about
was.
you, Matt? When did you finally
I
rewatch it?
didn't get my hands on it until Jared actually, I think you got me a copy of the DVD. Was it Ken Bradley who had those?
No, Mike was distributing
Was
those
it Mike?
things.
Was it you?
Well, I made a special edition.
Well, I tell you what, I got that, and and Mike obviously did a great job. It had the cover of the DVD on it, and it was
Yes.
spectacular. And it was a prized possession. Believe it or not, there was a time when I collected physical media,
I still
and
have mine.
and it was a prized possession of mine. And it was cool because he had all the old commercials still in it. So it's a real time capsule of a watch.
I
And
got a lot of info I stole from the website. That time there was a Star Wars Holiday Special website. It is
Mhm.
now, it's still alive, I think, isn't it?
It might be because they credits that guy in the documentary.
He had done interviews with people that were in it, and so that was a plethora of information as well.
but it was pretty unwatchable. I don't think I got through it in one sitting for sure.
It's hard. It's
No, you
hard.
can't.
And it's not, it's hard to explain if you've never seen it. Almost most people have seen Star Wars, but when you see the main character, especially when Mark Hamill gets on screen, he looks like he's being made up for like a local community theater production of Star Wars. And he has so much theater makeup caked on his face,
Mhm.
and
His hair, he has a weird haircut.
it's just so weird. He looks like he's like ready for a viewing. And
Yeah, he does. He looks like he's a mortician has made him up.
it's really gross. And it just gets weirder and weirder, and Chewie's family is strange, and it throws you off. And in the documentary, it's very funny because they call it out, and because when you watch it, you notice it, but it's funny to hear other people call it out. There's like 8 minutes long of nothing but Wookiee dialogue with no subtitles.
Which was Lucas's absolute insistence. Like everyone tried to say this is a bad idea, and Lucas was like, "No, this is
It's
what
like
I want."
8 minutes of nothing but Wookiee.
Oh, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make him talk. You're gonna have to deal with it.
Well, that's the thing was when you watch it right away, it's off. First of all, it's shot on video.
It's on video.
Secondly,
That's something that immediately throws people off. I've found who haven't seen it before. There's like, why does this look like? My sister said, why does this look like a soap opera?
It looks just like a soap opera.
and then the first thing you see is the Millennium Falcon cockpit, and it's just cheap cardboard.
Oh, it's cardboard junk.
Which by that time they had blown through their entire budget. Like that's another thing about the director that Lucas asked them to use was not suited for this job.
Oh,
and within
amazing.
like 3 days, they had done like 24-hour shoot days, and they were completely out of money. So this cockpit looks funny, and then you cut to that weird. Was it 8 minutes?
It's something like 8 or 9 minutes of Wookiee talk.
No subtitles.
The Wookiees look ridiculous. I mean, Chewie's wife looks like a normal Wookiee, but like his father looks like the beast from Big Trouble in Little China. And
He does.
it's just they're just all ridiculous, and it's like it doesn't make any sense.
And
you're
the
like, all right.
Chewbacca and Lumpy looks really strange. Although I do recall my sister going, "Oh, he's kind of cute. He's like a little Ewok or something." But
I think when the thing really goes off the rails is with the first I mean, the thing's off the rails from the beginning, so it's hard to say when it goes off. But I think when you really get a sense of like, oh my gosh, is the hologram scene.
With the Cirque du Soleil people.
Yes, and that when you're like, you're like, this is wrong. Like, it feels off. Yeah.
Which again, they remind you constantly that this is a true variety show. It doesn't matter that it's Star Wars. There's like current of the day variety acts being put in here. And they try to
Harvey
get
Korman does not belong in Star Wars.
Oh my god.
Oh, and well, it's funny too, because I don't know if it's covered so much in the documentary, but I know in the book they talk about some of the acrobats who were in that scene, how grueling and horrendous it was. Like they thought some people were going to die.
Yeah, people were
filming that.
When they were doing the cantina scene, people were literally passing out.
Oh, that was funny. Like it was 100 degrees and they're wearing all those masks.
They're under those like TV lights, and they're just like.
One of the gems of the documentary was I don't know the gentleman's name, but one of the camera ops they interview throughout the documentary, which is really interesting because it's his perspective of like going through all the directors and the mess and the chaos of being on set and the long hours and the confusion and nobody knows what's going on and nothing makes sense. And it's hilarious because coming from a TV background, it's funny to think that these guys, the crew members, are a part of a production and know what a train wreck they're on.
Yeah, they know right away. As soon as the director comes in, and then they had those two producers who were songwriters who had no idea what they were doing. And like, so yeah, like to what you're saying, Matt, the crew immediately like, oh boy, we're in trouble. And the union workers were loving it because they were going into double.
They were getting like what they went up to like quadruple overtime.
But they said even then, after the third day, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, we're not getting any sleep. This is a mess.
It's a mess.
Yeah. Of course, one of the things that stands out immediately is that it is shot on video. The first scene though is intercut with film from Star Wars
outtakes.
And it's very strange. They do that to show the Millennium Falcon flying around. It's just lifts from New Hope. And there is an interesting deleted scene of Vader walking with an Imperial officer that was
a couple Mos
Eisley, yeah. So in that way, it's kind of an interesting curiosity. You see these little glimpses of things. And honestly, that was probably one of the coolest things about it for me the first time I saw it. Because, I mean, I understood what I was seeing. I was like, oh, this stuff was shot for New Hope and not used. So that was kind of interesting. But, they did get James Earl Jones to, record like 7 lines of dialogue. I thought, as we're jumping around here, the cartoon, I think it's in the book. I don't know if it's addressed in the documentary, but the guy who was running the sound studio where Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and Mark Hamill came to record their lines for the cartoon, because they actually voiced the characters in this cartoon. And the guy who ran the studio was like, with Carrie and Harrison, they came in, they read the lines, and he was like, okay, you want to give it another shot? And Harrison's like, no, I think you got what you need. And him and Carrie, I don't know, I don't think they were there together, but he said that both of them were like, they gave him like 20 minutes and they were gone. But Mark Hamill stayed there all day because he was fascinated by this guy's studio. He wanted to talk to him about, old time radio and voiceovers and stuff, which, turned out to be that's how Mark Hamill's making bank these days.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. But the Boba Fett cartoon was one of those things in my mind that I never forgot, because I always remember the cartoon and I never knew where it came from, but I knew there was the Boba Fett cartoon out there. And I remember as a kid getting Boba Fett as a character and so happy because I knew who Boba Fett was. And I don't remember how I knew, but it's because I watched that cartoon and I knew who Boba Fett was. And Boba Fett was always my favorite character, always my favorite figure. But That cartoon still holds up. I mean, it's cheesy animation, but it's a sign of the times. But it's a good story, and it's a good
Well,
intro to Boba Fett.
I think the thing about the animated portion was that it has a really interesting style to it. That's makes it interesting to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not just some like Hanna-Barbera cartoon. There's a real quality to it that, I mean, it's a little distorted, like as far as realism.
Just
but
look at Han Solo in that cartoon.
but it looks good,
It's an interesting take on Harrison Ford's features.
Yes.
It's really the watchable part of that special that you can sit and watch the whole thing of that section and be like, oh, that was fun. That was cool. And then it goes back to the garbage.
To me, the part of that is just really terrible, and there's a lot of terrible in it, is the Harvey Korman scene where he's supposed to be like a robot.
What stuff? Oh, no. That's different.
And where he's like reassembling. I mean, it's
he's trying to tell the kid how to
not funny.
Where he's
Nothing
acting.
he does is funny in that. Nothing is funny.
It's like, but this is like grueling, not funny. Like, it's like they turn the camera on and they say, hey, Harvey, do some funny stuff.
Remember, every one of the 10,000 terminals on your circuit breaker module is marked in a particular color. Beautiful, aren't they? Like a rainbow.
It's not, it's so lame. It's just so bad. You can't believe how
lame.
And that's what makes it worse, is it's trying to be funny and it's just not.
Like
at
the cooking
all.
show he was doing.
At least that has an interest. At least, I mean, no, that's not good. But at least
nothing. It was so not
something's
Star Wars.
happening.
It was so dumb.
The
just
robot
so
thing
dumb.
is just him like making stupid.
He's trying to act like a
motions.
robot
Oh,
who's
my gosh.
malfunctioning.
It's like embarrassing.
But you know,
So
what
bad.
did you get to see as a kid? If you got to watch it, you got to see stormtroopers, which was cool.
Yeah.
And
you got to see an Imperial officer who just would snap all the time.
Imperial.
And with the giant
Walkie-talkie.
Oh man, that was so bad.
You know, we should really take some time and just talk about the holiday special elephant in the room here. And that's
oh
my gosh.
I can feel my creation.
The scene is, it's funny as how to hear other people talk about that had the same response to this thing.
What's funny though is I didn't know it was supposed to be Cher, that they were really gunning to cast her for that role and they couldn't get her.
Yes. Cher was
She dodged the bullet on that one.
Man.
Poor Diane Carroll.
Man, what an out of place, bizarre, surreal kind of.
Well, you know what though? Think about what that clip you sent us today of Linda Carter. I mean,
maybe a sign of the times. Could be.
I mean, if they could get away with that, they thought, well, let's have Grandpa watching his porn in the middle of the living room.
I think there's a quote in the book. I can't remember exactly what it is, but somebody says something, and he's just like, "This was the most inappropriate." I mean, and I can't even figure out if, they knew what they were doing, like they understood how this would be received, and I don't know if that was something that was even at the top of their mind, or if they were just naive enough to think, "Oh, this is something different."
Like entertainment, like he's just watching entertainment.
Yeah. But the stuff that she's saying.
Yes. I can feel my creation.
We are excited, aren't we?
I know you're searching for me. Searching. I am here. My voice is for you alone. I am found in your eyes only. I exist for you. I am in your mind as you create me. Oh, yes. I can feel my creation. I'm getting your message. Are you getting mine? Oh, we are excited, aren't we? Well, just relax. Just relax. Yeah. A little more. We can have a good time, can't we? I'll tell you a secret. I find you adorable.
I mean,
Oh,
And he's sitting there like with his beast mouth from Big Trouble. He's
and they
going
do
back
that
and forth.
crappy video feedback effect.
oh yeah, where it just makes a trail behind her, and yeah, that is
But I mean, if you watch that, he's from start to finish, he's obviously getting more and more excited and more worked up.
oh
It's
yeah.
like-
Just hope they have some bleach or something.
so I I don't know really what else. I mean, you can imagine what wet fur smells like.
Man, he's probably got the. Is it like a dog that have lipstick that comes out?
Maybe they should change his name to Krusty.
Oh,
Ah.
jeez.
Man, the Wookiee Red Rocket just.
Oh.
Something.
Hey, what's Grandpa doing? Oh, crap.
Oh shit! He's on the hollow
Well,
porn again.
So that, yeah, that was outrageous. Although there's also mention of like Art Carney's lead up to that. He's like, "Hey, it's this is really something else, you know, and it something that seems very ad libbed." But I think Art Carney knew what was going on. He's like,
Well,
"Hey,
apparently after lunch he didn't know what was going
oh
on.
no," because he was always drunk.
His bathtub was full of booze.
Yeah,
We'd
in
go
his
off for
trailer.
lunch. They said we knew after lunch we'd gotten everything we were going to get out of him.
Yeah, they had to get all art stuff in the morning because at night or after lunch he was tanked, which is kind of funny. There's a story in the book that I thought was fantastic, and of course Peter Mayhew, I guess, always had a soft spot for the special because I mean, in many ways he was kind of the focus of the
Yeah, and
special.
also there was talk of maybe a spinoff.
Yeah. And so Peter he thought this was really cool. They flew him to America to be in this thing, and he was there was some confusion regarding who was actually picking him up. And they're like, "Wait, the car that we thought we had, we do not have the car." So they sent like a PA to pick him up, and this PA was driving a Camaro. And he said, and they went to pick him up. Apparently, it was quite a drive, like at least an hour from where they were to the airport. And he said that on the drive back, Peter Mayhew's head was up on the roof, and he was bent. He was bent like sideways, and his knees. He had to pull his knees up, because he didn't have room for his legs in that car. And this guy was just saying, he was such a gentleman. He didn't really even complain. He tried to keep a conversation going while he was twisted into a pretzel. And and I was like, this story is a perfect summation of what this whole thing, just how it all sort of went sideways.
This story reminds me of something that actually happened to me.
Well, what's that? Were
I
you
was
going to be in a
working-
TV special?
I was in Nashville and I was working as a PA on a country music show. I forget who the artists were. I think, oh gosh, I can't remember. Anyway, so they sent me to the airport to pick up one of the crew. Like, I don't know if he was a sound guy or a light guy or something. I don't know. So as you know, I have 2 dogs. And I used to take my dogs like to the park and stuff like that when I lived in Nashville. So I go to the airport, I pick the guy up. He gets in my seat. We're driving to the place. We're having a great conversation. Super nice guy. We're just talking. And I look in the back of his shirt. He's covered with dog hair. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go,
What a slob.
I'm like, hey, listen, I am so sorry, but you have my dog hair all over your shirt. I hope that's not a problem. And he's like, oh no, I'm really allergic to dogs. And he's like, I hope I have some allergy. pills. And I'm like dying. I'm like sitting there like, I wish I could just shrink into a little black hole. I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. So yeah, so when I read that story, I could kind of relate to that predicament.
Man.
Man, did he end up dying?
I don't know. I kind of like dropped him off and I like tried never to see him again. If I ever saw him, I like went the other direction.
Oh, geez. Well, so while we're talking about the special and everything, is there is there something about anything in the documentary that stands out where you thought, oh, that's interesting? Like I never knew
Well,
that.
Yeah,
I
Or,
think. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
uh, you know, growing up with Star Wars, you always hear different names associated with Star Wars, but I didn't realize the level of what Charlie Lippincott did to
mhm.
with Star Wars. I had no idea. His story to me was one of the most fascinating ones I've heard in a long time about Star Wars. Like this guy was pretty much the reason why Star Wars got off the ground
Mhm.
and off and running and became, the hit that it was. The legwork and groundwork that this guy did was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
if you read the making of Star Wars, he's prominently featured in that.
I never read it, and this is like the first real like story I've heard about this guy, and it's like this is really amazing what this guy did, going making deals with Marvel before the movie came out for like 3 different
Yeah, it was really
comic books,
smart. I mean, they timed how the issues would be released.
and nobody did that
Mhm.
before. Like he was really like thinking outside the box back then, and he was like hitting the convention centers, and he was the one
Mhm.
doing the conventions and the
Yeah.
it was
He t-
really really interesting to hear
he
about
he
his
took
involvement.
he took the he took Star Wars to the San Diego Comic-Con before that
Mhm.
was like a big deal.
Right.
And when it was mostly focused on, comic books and, sci-fi nerds. And I mean, he knew who he was trying to sell it to. So he's like, this is the audience I think that we need to be pitching this movie to. And yeah, it was really kind of a grassroots thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that in later in life he started a Facebook page and he was kind of a very angry and bitter man.
At first, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
But he
He had a
really,
very bitter falling out with
yeah,
Lucas.
yeah. I think he
Felt like
after
his
after
contribution wasn't as
Well,
appreciated as
once Lucas went corporate, he kind of got basically left behind in the dust. And his work, and I think it kind of went a little bit unacknowledged, the importance
Mhm.
of the work he had done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think especially towards the he died a few years back, but he was at the end he really kind of resented that he didn't sort of benefit a little more from getting making Star Wars into helping make Star Wars into sort of what it became. And
I think he's
but
got an argument there. So
well, yeah, I think
Yeah, it was his idea to do the novel the year before the movie
Del
came
Rey
out.
books and
yeah, and like the whole Marvel thing. I mean, with there's a little story about Stan Lee. Marvel was in dire financial straits at that time, and with the Star Wars comic, that really sort of saved them from oblivion
Hmm.
as far as because once the Star Wars comics started coming out, everybody was buying them, and it got Marvel financially kind of back on track, and that's something else you can say that Lippincott
And I must say,
did.
I'll always have a very soft spot for those old Marvel stories. Those are actually a really if you're a Star Wars fan, you've never read through the original Marvel run, you're missing out on something.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to put together a run of that,
I
and
still have mine. It's
I
one of the things
know
I've kept.
it's that's good because it's not an inexpensive proposition
It's
anymore.
funny, I bought all mine right before Star Wars came back.
Hmm.
I got all my back issues before the resurgence, so I got them all
Mhm.
at a pretty decent price.
Yeah, for years you could buy a lot of those, for you'd find a lot of them in dollar boxes and stuff like that, and now
But
it's not the case anymore.
one thing I want to talk about, it's kind of to what you were asking about, Jared, is in retrospect, people kind of go, well, how did this happen? How did this happen? And if you think about it, this only came out a year after the theatrical release of Star Wars.
Hmm.
And there was still, I mean, the popularity of it was still going, but there was still no way of knowing this thing would become what it has become. And they were just, the concern was to keep, the concern was once it left the theater, it would leave the consciousness of the public. And so one of the things they did, because variety shows were so popular before the holiday special, they were making appearances on variety shows. Like there's the famous one on Donnie and Marie. Bob Hope had a small thing with the ever smoking hot Olivia Newton-John. But apparently there was a meeting where Warner Brothers, which Lucas had a miserable experience with Warner Brothers with THX 1138.
Yes.
Where the executive, I can't remember his name, and they were trying to get a re-release of THX 1138. And I guess his tactic was to try to bring them back to earth by saying, well, in a couple of months, no one's going to even be thinking about this movie. And from that point on, Lucas, which apparently Lucas can hold a grudge.
Yeah, he said by Labor Day, nobody's going to remember this.
And that's when Lucas was like, became determined to keep Star Wars moving. And this was too before the Star Wars figures came out, because there was that delay because Kenner wasn't ready.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. The timing was before, because once the toys came out, that was it. It was solidified. Star Wars was not going away. I mean, once everyone started getting those toys, had them in their home to play with every single day, Star Wars was not going anywhere. So the holiday special was right before those toys broke. So I think it's, sometimes we look at things from hindsight and we don't live in that time where, there was no reason to think that Star Wars would become what it became. I mean, Planet of the Apes was a franchise that did fairly well. You had some toys and some comics, but, nothing close to what Star Wars would do.
And, when you think about it, the networks, back then there was the big networks, and that was basically it. And these organizations they were superpowers back then. And you didn't tell them how to do stuff. They did stuff the way that they felt was the safest, most efficient, and what's going to get the most eyeballs. And to do a variety show back then was like a no-brainer. They were good at it. They've been doing it for years.
And they were easy and they were cheap.
Yep. And they said, this is a perfect thing. And to Mike's point, they're already doing variety shows. Let's just make our own variety show. They're going to love it, because that's exactly what the Star Wars fan wants, is a variety show of acrobats and and hologram porn and Carrie Fisher singing at the end.
Jefferson Starship.
Yes.
Jefferson Starship, which,
Light
by the way,
sky
this song,
on fire.
that was very funny. They're like, we need a song. Like, well, we got this song. Like, that sounds great. That sounds like a sci-fi song. And like, put it in.
And I like how when in the documentary, they reveal that they just threw him in a room with a bunch of crappy clothes and said, okay, put together your outfits. And they were just like, okay, yeah, that's also another great story. So another thing that kind of popped up was they talked about how Lucas had maybe these ideas in his head of doing these, like this was going to be sort of his Wookiee story, that like stories that didn't fit within the movies that he was making, but side stories that he wanted to tell in like this visual medium.
Right.
And that's one thing that kind of interested me. He's like, okay, well, I've got this Wookiee story. There's some other stories that we could do kind of if this format works out. And I think he was thinking this before they turned it into like this musical variety show. Like maybe he was thinking about making these little specials for television that would have been, hey, here's a 30-minute show with Chewbacca's family. This is what they're doing and stuff like that. And that was an idea he had to do between the films to kind of keep it in the public's mind. But I think his experience with the holiday special sort of just he immediately just threw all that out the window and
I
said,
mean,
"Well,
they didn't
this is
venture
not
back.
what."
They didn't venture back in that world until the Ewok special, right? Back in 1987.
No, that was 84 and
Was it
85.
84? The Ewoks? No,
Mm-hmm.
it couldn't have been 84.
Another thing,
was.
yeah, it was right after Jedi.
Oh my God.
Right after, but see, another thing too is that was right before he started that right before Empire started.
Mm-hmm.
And we know if you've read the making of Empire, Empire was not smooth sailing.
Correct.
You know, I think they ran out of money halfway through. He was trying to self-finance it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going to banks, showing them footage from the movie to get more footage.
Yeah.
And
That fortunately worked out for him.
but I think it's pretty clear he didn't understand the medium. But also to what you're saying, Jared, they found notes in Ralph McQuarrie's possession that
After he
they
died.
believe are George Lucas's notes about the holiday special.
What he wanted it to be.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting too, he wanted Raquel Welch to be on it. But
Yes.
so
Hey,
Raquel, come over and sit on my lap, would you?
remember,
Yeah,
she
great-
done
great-
some kind of
great
special
special.
where she wore a spacesuit or something like that.
Yeah, she did. There was some footage of her in the documentary where
Oh,
she was
yeah.
in kind of a skimpy
Which
space.
you know, would have been okay.
I
Although I will
remember.
say Diane Carroll was very attractive in that special.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the place we all used to and still work. I told Raquel Welch where the bathrooms were, and I was like,
You're just
You know,
one
she
step
dated,
away from the holiday special, man.
She dated Alice Cooper.
"Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Oh,
Were in a
wow.
relationship.
Yeah."
So
Should we
Anyway.
jump ahead and talk about Carrie Fisher and her contribution,
her singing.
her singing?
Well,
Well,
sure.
apparently the rumor has it she actually has a good singing voice.
I mean, you do a few lines of good old Spice, and
Her mother wanted her to be a singer, apparently.
Yes. And they do talk a little bit about how you know, she doesn't have a terrible singing voice, but you can watch that special and feel like there's not it's not quite probably up to snuff. So she I like when she sort of runs into the table when she's walking around it.
Well, something else that was noted is there was a lot of stuff going on behind the
Yes.
scenes.
Yeah, I
I mean,
heard it.
you could just take one look and know that everyone is on cloud nine there. They're-
Well, they would have, I guess, big bowls of just pills that people would just grab handfuls of, and they'd know what they were from, their
Experience.
appearance.
dear Lord.
And most of it was amphetamines, and that's what a lot of these people were taking, making this. And you really can't tell though once you watch it. I mean, it seems like something completely.
But I mean, if you've made it to the point where Carrie Fisher is singing, you've gotten kicked in the nuts repeatedly
Yes.
through this special. And it's
Yeah,
just like, and then you think maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You have another, actor from the movies is coming in costume. It's, might be fantastic to see them, but it's not. And it's bad. And the actually only shining light in this whole thing, aside from seeing Chewbacca, is R2D2 and C3PO, which you can't really ruin with theater makeup and
R2D2 as R2D2. That's how they introduced. Yeah. And
You know
that's
what? I tell you one thing the book went over. There was a whole interesting thing about, I've always heard they had issues with David Prowse, but apparently he was like, people genuinely did not like him. Like there's that line that Anthony Daniels had where they asked him about David Prowse, and Anthony Daniels said, he said, David Prowse is not an actor. He is a shape. So they had a guy who was, now obviously Darth Vader's not in this because they use footage, but anytime you saw Darth Vader in an appearance, it was this one guy they had hired. I can't remember
his name was Kermit something.
That's right.
That's
right.
what you remember, because
I was thinking
Kermit,
Grover. I was going to say Grover.
it was named after a Muppet. Yeah, his name is Kermit, and he was the guy who did all the parades and the special. He was the guy who put his feet in the cement at the Hollywood Chinese theater. They're not going to be flying Prowse in from the UK every time they do this. And apparently, yes,
they didn't
Prowse. No, Prowse was difficult to deal with, and it's kind of surprising to me that
because we met him.
Hey, I'm at the airport. I'm ready to fly. Come on, jerks.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I've been in the presence of David Prowse a couple of times. Got a few autographs from him. I mean, he was always pleasant enough, but this was, of course, years later when he wasn't doing this. But it's a miracle that they didn't replace him with this guy, because this guy also was, he's a big dude, like 6'5", 6'6". And he filled out the costume quite well and was apparently a sweetheart of a man, and everybody got along with him. And they're the one, he's the one that Lucasfilm would use in all of the publicity stuff. But, David Prowse kept his job through the original trilogy. And that's something else they talk about is that Kermit guy. I can't remember his last name, but it's kind of an interesting story.
And then we get to finish the holiday special with all the Wookiees walking into the light with red robes.
Well, that's when they had no money. They basically went to the drugstore and bought a bunch of Wookiee masks. And
that's what they said.
And they used robes because they couldn't afford to do the rest of the costume.
Yeah, so. they put robes on them.
And they bought a bunch of candles. They bought like every candle they could get their hands on.
But in a final, almost like an FU to George Lucas from Disney, the holiday special, which he's always kind of, riled against. He's like, I hate it. It'll all go away.
I want to smash it all down.
What do you see when you go? And Jared, you just showed it to us earlier. You have a mug yourself with a robed Wookiee that says Happy Life Day.
Yes.
You go to
Galaxy's Edge.
Galaxy's Edge. There's Life Day stuff all over the place. They have Life Day celebrations around Christmas. I mean, they've embraced it as ultra canon that they
you can buy a Life Day glowing orb.
Yep.
Which is a ball with a light in it.
So I find that to be
surprising they haven't released it then.
They put the cartoon on Disney Plus, and they did release that on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But I think there's some things that are just, I don't know if it's there are upscaled AI versions of the holiday special which look incredible, which look better than they ever could have possibly looked when they were first broadcast. But I don't know. I don't know why maybe it's because they think, well, anybody who wants to watch this thing can just watch it wherever they want to now, which is obviously what you can do. Nobody in these days is having to, get bootleg VHSs to watch this thing. I mean, you can watch it on your phone, on YouTube. There's like 15 different versions of it uploaded with commercials and without. So, I mean, I don't know why they haven't. I think they're monetizing the parts of it that, I think they're making their money off of it. I don't think they really want to have the time or expense to, restore this thing to a releasable state.
They don't need to. The middle-aged fans that know what this is are there to buy the merchandise, just like Jared has in his hand right now. So you're right. Disney can capitalize without having to do any real heavy lifting on it. It'll move itself if they just put some product out there.
I don't, what, to that point, I don't think they need to. I mean, you can find a good copy of it to watch. We got this great documentary that was made, an even better book that covers it. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I think there's nothing else to be said. And it's something you can either watch or you can skip.
There's one of the guys involved in this documentary. His name is Kyle Newman. He directed Fanboys, the movie, and he's a frequent guest on well, there are no other podcasts, of course, except the hyperspace, but he's a frequent guest on a radio show called Rebel Force Radio. And to hear him talk about it, he's one of the producers of a Disturbance in the Force. And he says that, if you want to introduce somebody to the holiday special, he suggests sitting them down and making them watch the documentary first. So you have context. So you understand sort of,
I agree.
time, when this was made, who it was made for, and you have this background information in your head. So going into the holiday special, it might actually make it kind of an interesting watch instead of just this overwhelming, like, what in the hell is all this crap? Um, and this documentary and the book provide amazing context for the holiday special, and it's really gratifying that these things were made and released, just because it's something that I don't think ever probably needs to be revisited, because I think we have the definitive documents with this documentary and the book. I think that's pretty much could be the final word on the making of this particular special.
And I'd like to add my final word.
Yeah, what's your final word?
Well, there's a debate, like, is it good, bad, or is it bad, bad? And I think it's bad, bad. I mean, I think it's bad.
Yeah,
I think but I don't hate that it exists.
sure.
I think it's an interesting point in time that deserves to be seen. It shouldn't be ignored. I tried to watch it with my family with the riff tracks commentary, which makes it infinitely better. And
Yeah.
even with that, for like 10 minutes, I was like, nope, we're done. We're not watching anymore. Um, but it's just like you said, when you have the context of the time, the backstory, it's really fascinating, especially considering what Star Wars became. And I will say this, and this is like the big difference of like my problem with Disney now, is I don't feel like it was made. I don't feel like they were angry at the fans. I don't think they were purposely trying to make something that would be controversial. I just don't think they knew what they had, and they just did what they knew how to do. And I think
Yeah, well said.
I think it's I think it's something any Star Wars fan, you got to sit through it at least once.
Well, you know
You
what it
have
is
to.
also. My final word on it is that this is something special for the first generation Star Wars fan.
Mhm.
It's Mike mentioned it earlier, the mystery that surrounded it,
Mhm.
the exclusivity of being able to get your hands on a copy of it, a bootleg copy. This was something that, as a Star Wars fan growing up at the movies, this was that kind of I'm not gonna say a holy grail, but it was kind of one of those long lost searchable items that if you got it, it was amazing. Even though you're holding a polished turd in your hand, you know, you're still really happy that you found it and that
Mhm.
you got it. And it is a quest for a Star Wars fan, that first Star Wars fan back in the day, to be able to find it and to be a part of it. And Star Wars fans today might be interested in knowing about it and, watching the documentary, reading the book, and even going on YouTube and watching it themselves. But there's no challenge in it. It's accessible. It's there. It's part of Star
Yep.
Wars, but it's just an easy, accessible part of Star Wars. If you're interested, you can instantly find it. So it really is one of those kind of nostalgic first generation things that I think a Star Wars fan will remember in that regard. And I think, Mike, that's probably why, although it is bad, there is still a little soft spot in your heart for it, just because it
Mhm.
existed, just
Oh,
because
like I
it was
said,
there.
I don't hate it exists. I'm glad it exists.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's there, but it is bad.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
Well, and I think Mike and Matt, you both hit on something it is something that is unique to the first generation Star Wars fan. The Star Wars fan of today can, fire up Disney Plus, fire up YouTube, and they can watch any Star Wars thing they want to on demand, which we didn't have. And that to us would have seemed like science fiction if somebody told us you could hold up a little box in your hand and watch Empire Strikes Back anytime you wanted to. Or when we were questing for this thing in the 90s, hold up this little box and watch this holiday special anytime you wanted to. It's just it's a snapshot in time that you can't recreate and you can never get back. And yeah, it's terrible. But how many times have we made jokes and laughed and talked about how terrible it is, about how we can feel our creation, or we are excited, aren't we? Or listen to or
Happy Life
talk
Day,
about
pal.
Happy Life Day, pal. And one last thing is I was at Star Wars Celebration probably 10 years ago. And me and, of course, Brian, the collector, were there together, and we got into, we were one of the last few people who got into Carrie Fisher's panel, her live panel. The auditorium was packed, but we found some seats. And she actually, I can say I've seen her sing the Life Day song live.
No
She sang
way.
it. Yeah, she gave us a rendition of it. So I've seen the holiday special song live in concert.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's a little thing I can carry with me for all time.
We celebrate a day of peace, a day of harmony, a day of joy we all can share together joyously, a day that takes us through the darkness, a day that leads us into light, a day that makes us want to celebrate the night.
You should definitely seek out A Disturbance in the Force. It is available to stream. I think you have to pay some money if you want to buy it or rent it. It's on all the big platforms. It's also available on Blu-ray. Blu-ray is a format that you can put on your shelf. It's physical media. I believe me and Mike have the Blu-ray, but
Yes.
the
Jared
book
gave
is all.
me and Matt the book for Christmas. It was a great
Yes.
Christmas gift. I read it in like 3 or 4 days. I couldn't put it down.
Wow, I'm glad. You know what? It's funny. I don't have a physical copy of the book yet, but I did listen to it on Audible. So I have read it. I've listened to it. I haven't read it, but I'm going to buy me a copy of it. But anyway, seek it out, A Disturbance in the Force, and seek out the holiday special. If you haven't watched it, and I know there's some people listening to this show.
Watch it with friends. This is the one thing you got to watch with some friends.
I work with some people who listen to the Hyperspace, and they have not seen the holiday special. And I'm encouraging everybody listening to this, you got to do it once. Like Matt said, everybody needs to sit. And right now, there's AI upscaled versions of it that look great. You can watch it on a big, HD TV, and it'll look great. But you won't get very far, so don't worry. The Hyperspace is rolling on. Season 8. Man, that's a lot of seasons so far. There's more to come from the Hyperspace. We've got more episodes. We've got some great ideas that we've been kicking around. We think you're going to love them. So keep subscribed, share the show with your friends, and we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content. So subscribe to the Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.